The night began like any other in the bright, electric world of late-night television. The studio lights glowed, the band played its jazzy riff, and Jimmy Fallon bounded onto the stage with his trademark grin. The audience roared, laughter spilling through the room like champagne bubbles. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, a warm reunion with a beloved guest. The Queen of Country herself, Reba McEntire. She walked out to thunderous applause. Her presence commanding but graceful, her smile polished and practiced. Dressed in a shimmering jacket that caught every spotlight, Reba waved to the audience, her charm undeniable. Fallon leapt from his chair to greet her, hugging her warmly before ushering her to her seat. It all seemed harmless, joyous, a routine late-night spectacle. The early minutes carried the easy rhythm of showbiz small talk. Fallon cracked jokes about Reba's music catalog, her decades in the industry, even her fiery personality on stage. The audience laughed on cue, Reba chuckled, and Fallon seemed perfectly in control of his element. On the surface, it was entertainment as usual, but beneath that glowing veneer, something darker brewed. Fallon leaned in, flashing a mischievous grin. His questions shifted, subtly at first, steering from Reba's new music to her opinions on country music's changing landscape, her past controversies, and the generational divide between old and new artists. Reba smiled politely, her southern charm intact, but her replies grew sharper, clipped at the edges. The audience didn't notice yet. Then Fallon pressed again, his tone playfully mocking but laced with provocation. He joked about Reba being out of touch with modern audiences, about her values clashing with the world of viral TikTok country stars. The laughter in the studio grew uneasy, thin, and hesitant. Reba's eyes hardened, even as her lips curled in a rehearsed grin. The tension was invisible to most, but palpable to those who knew her. Reba McEntire was not a woman easily disrespected, and Jimmy Fallon was treading dangerously close to a line he didn't even realize existed. It was the calm before the storm, the moment before the spark met gasoline. Nobody in that studio, not even Fallon himself, could have guessed how quickly the night was about to unravel. The laughter that had filled the room moments earlier began to thin out, like air seeping from a balloon. Fallon leaned back in his chair, tossing out another barbed joke masked with a smile. He quipped about how Reba must feel left behind by the new generation of country singers flooding social media. It was meant to be playful, at least in Fallon's mind. But the delivery, the smirk, the audience's half-hearted chuckles, it all landed like a slap. Reba's eyes narrowed, and the smile that had charmed millions across decades of music and television faltered ever so slightly. She leaned forward, her voice steady but edged with steel. "Jimmy," she said, "I've been doing this a lot longer than TikTok has been around. I know a thing or two about staying power." The crowd chuckled nervously, sensing a shift. Fallon laughed, but the sound rang hollow, forced. Instead of backing down, he doubled down. He poked again, this time with a jab about Reba's music being old-fashioned, suggesting she was clinging to a past that the industry had already moved on from. The studio lights, once warm and inviting, now seemed to spotlight the rising tension. Reba tilted her head, her trademark charm replaced by something sharper. Old-fashioned? She repeated her southern drawl, drawing out each syllable. "Jimmy, respect doesn't go out of style, and neither does telling the truth." A murmur rippled through the audience, part shock, part excitement. This wasn't the easy banter they were used to seeing on Fallon's stage. This was something raw, unpolished, teetering on the edge of collapse. Fallon shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at the cameras, then back at Reba, trying to reel the moment back into comedy. He tossed out another joke, but it fell flat. The audience wasn't laughing now. They were watching, transfixed, as a line had been drawn right there in front of them. Fallon's role as the jovial host had slipped, replaced by a man out of his depth, poking a legend who wasn't about to let her name be diminished. The first sparks had caught fire. The air in the room was charged, heavy with the anticipation of what was about to come next. And in that moment, it was clear this wasn't going to be a harmless late-night interview. It was about to become a battle. The moment the audience realized this wasn't lighthearted banter, the atmosphere in the studio changed. What had begun as late-night entertainment was quickly transforming into something raw, unscripted, and dangerously real. Fallon leaned forward, sensing he was losing control of the room. His smile flickered, faltered, and then he pushed again, a desperate attempt to regain his footing. "So, Reba," he said, chuckling nervously, "do you ever feel like your music belongs in a museum instead of on the charts?" The words hung in the air like poison. Gasps rose from the crowd. Some laughed, but it was uneasy. Hollow laughter, the kind that dies as quickly as it starts. Fallon's attempt at humor had crossed into humiliation, and everyone knew it. Reba didn't flinch. She didn't laugh. She didn't let it slide. Instead, she sat taller, her eyes blazing under the studio lights. Her voice, calm but cutting, filled the room. "Jimmy," she said slowly, each word deliberate. "My music isn't some relic for a museum. It's the soundtrack of people's lives. Weddings, funerals, heartbreaks, celebrations, you name it. You don't put that in a museum. You keep it alive." The audience erupted in applause, clapping and cheering for the country icon who had just turned Fallon's jab into a standing declaration of her legacy. Fallon tried to laugh it off, his hands flailing, his voice rising above the noise. Hey, I'm just kidding," he insisted, but the damage was done. He had poked too hard, and Reba wasn't letting him off the hook. Her gaze never wavered. "You know," she added, her voice sharpening, "now sometimes it feels like you're more interested in making headlines than having real conversations." That line landed like a punch to the gut. Fallon froze, his usual arsenal of jokes failing him. The crowd murmured, some gasping, others whispering. The tension was now undeniable. The divide between guest and host glaring under the hot lights. For the first time, Fallon looked rattled. The charming veneer that carried him through countless interviews cracked, and opposite him sat Reba McEntire, calm yet fierce, commanding the stage as though it were her own. The clash had ignited. What was once comedy had turned into confrontation, and the audience could feel it in their bones. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The studio felt different now, colder, sharper, as though every light overhead had turned into a spotlight, exposing not just Fallon's faltering grin, but the growing storm between him and his guest. The laughter was gone. The audience, once eager to clap along, sat in rapt silence, their eyes flicking between Fallon's strained expression and Reba's fiery composure. Fallon, desperate to claw back control, leaned on his instincts. Push harder. Stir the pot, turn the tension into spectacle. "Come on, Reba," he said with a half smile. "Don't take it so seriously. You've had your time, but maybe it's time to step aside for the new generation. Isn't it better to bow out gracefully than, well, storm out?" The word storm echoed like a warning shot. The crowd gasped. Reba's lips tightened, her body shifting ever so slightly forward. Fallon thought he was clever, thought he had the upper hand. But what he didn't realize was that he had just cornered a legend. And legends don't go quietly. Reba's voice cut through the studio like a blade. "Storm out?" she repeated, her drawl dripping with disdain. "Jimmy, I've stood on more stages than you can count. I've sung for presidents. I've sung for farmers. I've sung for soldiers. I don't bow out. I stand tall. And I don't let late-night hosts tell me when my time is up." The crowd erupted, clapping, whistling, even a few shouts of support. Fallon tried to laugh over the noise, waving his hands like a conductor trying to tame chaos. But his face was flushed now, his nervous chuckle more hollow than ever. "You're really taking this the wrong way," he muttered, shifting in his seat. But Reba wasn't finished. Her tone grew sharper, her words deliberate, echoing with the weight of truth. "You make a living mocking people," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "That's fine, Jimmy. But don't mistake jokes for respect. Respect is earned, not faked for a laugh." Gasps rippled through the studio. Fallon's mouth opened, but no words came. The silence was louder than any joke he could muster, and in that silence, the balance of power shifted. Fallon, the host of the show, was no longer in control. Reba McEntire, the guest he tried to tease into submission, was commanding the stage, and the battle was just heating up. The tension inside the studio had reached a fever pitch. The laughter was long gone, replaced by an electric hum of anticipation. Every audience member leaned forward in their seat, sensing that something unforgettable was about to happen. Fallon's usual charm had crumbled, his nervous chuckles doing little to mask the panic in his eyes. He tried to shift gears, but instead of steering out of the storm, he walked straight into its eye. "Reba," Fallon said, forcing a laugh. "I mean, really? Aren't you just a little too sensitive? It's all in good fun." That was the spark that lit the powder keg. The audience groaned audibly. Reba's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing. She leaned forward, her voice no longer playful, no longer tempered by patience. Sensitive. She snapped, her tone ringing through the studio like a warning siren. "Jimmy, I've taken criticism my whole life. I've been told I was too country, too old, too outspoken. But I'll tell you what, being disrespected in front of millions of people isn't fun. It's cheap." The audience gasped. Some clapped in support. Fallon's smile evaporated. He stammered, searching for a lifeline. But Reba wasn't done. "You sit there night after night, hiding behind jokes. But when the joke cuts too deep, you act like it's harmless. Well, guess what? Words matter. Respect matters. And I don't have to sit here and let you laugh at me while the world watches." The studio erupted in applause, a wave of noise that seemed to shake the very stage. Fallon sat frozen, his hands clenched, his grin gone. His reputation as the affable, harmless host had been ripped apart in front of his own audience. Reba placed her hands on the desk, steady and deliberate. Her voice softened, but the steel in her words was undeniable. "You invited me here to talk about my music. It's my career, my journey, not to make me the punchline of your monologue." The silence that followed was deafening. Fallon swallowed hard, his face pale under the harsh studio lights. He had lost control, and the breaking point had arrived. The audience didn't just sense the storm anymore. They were witnessing it firsthand, live and unfiltered, and everyone knew what was coming next. The studio air felt heavy, almost suffocating. The energy had shifted from tense to explosive. Reba sat tall, her fiery gaze locked on Fallon, while the audience buzzed like a hive about to swarm. The cameras kept rolling, and millions would soon see what was about to unfold. Fallon leaned in, his voice shaky but attempting authority. "Reba, come on now. Let's not blow this out of proportion. We're just having a conversation." Reba's lips curled into a tight smile. But it wasn't amusement, it was defiance. She shook her head slowly. "Jimmy, this isn't a conversation. This is you trying to talk over me, dismiss me, and turn me into a late-night soundbite. Well, I've been in this business longer than you've been cracking jokes, and I'm not here to play that game." The audience roared in approval. Fallon's face flushed. He reached for a card on his desk, fumbling for a quick pivot. All right, he said nervously. "Why don't we just—" But before he could finish, Reba stood up. Her sudden movement sent a jolt through the room. At 5'7", with the commanding presence of a woman who had sold out arenas, she towered in that moment. The audience gasped. Phones shot into the air as people scrambled to capture the moment. Fallon froze, staring up at her like a man watching a train barrel toward him. Reba adjusted her jacket, her voice calm but razor sharp. "I don't need to sit here and let you belittle me. Jimmy. Not when I've spent my whole life fighting for respect in an industry that loves to laugh at women like me." A thunderous cheer broke out from the crowd. Fallon raised his hands, desperate to reel it back. "Reba, please sit down. We can work this out. It's just live TV, you know how it is." But Reba wasn't swayed. She leaned across the desk, just close enough for her words to cut through the cameras like a blade. "You think this is about TV? No, Jimmy, this is about dignity. And tonight, I'm not letting you take mine." The audience erupted. Fallon looked rattled, his eyes darting to producers offstage. He was losing her. He was losing control. And with every second, the world's eyes were locked on what she would do next. Reba took a deep breath, glanced at the stunned crowd, and then turned toward the exit. The walkout had begun. The studio was no longer a stage. It was a battlefield. Every eye in the room tracked Reba as she moved toward the exit, her heels striking the floor like a war drum. The cameras followed her every step, catching the shock, the awe, and the raw fury radiating off her like heat. Jimmy Fallon, pale and panicked, shot up from behind his desk. "Reba, wait. Let's just calm down. We can edit this out. We can fix it." But Reba didn't even glance back. She unhooked the microphone from her dress, her hands steady despite the storm. With one swift motion, she placed it on the chair she'd just vacated, the sound echoing through the silent studio. Like a gavel slamming down, the audience gasped. Some clapped. Others shouted. Phones recorded from every angle. This wasn't just a walkout. It was history being written in real time. Fallon rushed forward, desperate to salvage what he could. "Reba, come on. Don't do this. You're overreacting." That word. Overreacting. Reba spun around, her eyes blazing with fury. Her voice thundered across the studio. "Overreacting? Jimmy, don't you dare reduce me to that word. You've spent the last 15 minutes interrupting, belittling, cornering me, and now you have the nerve to call me emotional." The audience exploded, half cheering, half gasping. Fallon's composure cracked. His hands flailed as he tried to reason with her, but his voice was swallowed by the uproar. Reba pointed toward the cameras, her tone steady, deliberate, unforgettable. "To the folks watching at home, I came here tonight to talk about music, about joy, about connection. Instead, I was dragged into a political ambush by someone who doesn't know the first thing about the people I sing for. You deserve better than this circus." Their words hit like thunder. The crowd was on its feet now, clapping, shouting, unable to contain the energy building in the room. Fallon stood frozen, his face red, his body stiff, as if realizing in that instant that his carefully crafted nice guy persona had shattered under the weight of her defiance. And then, the moment that sealed it, Reba turned back, toward Fallon, her voice cutting like a knife. "Next time you want to debate politics, invite a politician. When you invite an artist, show some respect." That, she strode toward the exit, head held high, leaving behind a stunned host, a roaring audience. In a television moment destined to live forever, the moment Reba disappeared behind the curtain, the studio was plunged into chaos. The audience buzzed with disbelief, half of them cheering wildly, the other half stunned into silence. Jimmy Fallon stood frozen in the spotlight, his smile long gone, his hands awkwardly clasped as though he'd just witnessed his own empire crumble in front of him. The cameras kept rolling. Producers whispered frantically into headsets, debating whether to cut to commercial or let the moment play out live. But it was already too late. Millions of eyes across America, and soon the world had seen it. Reba McEntire, country music legend, had just stormed off The Tonight Show in an unflinching act of defiance. On social media, the explosion was instantaneous. Within minutes, #RebaWalksOut and #FallonClash trended worldwide. Clips spread like wildfire, dissected frame by frame, with fans and critics alike weighing in. Was Fallon out of line? Did Reba overreact? The internet divided itself into factions, Team Fallon and Team Reba, and the battleground was fierce. But beyond the hashtags, the fallout ran deeper. Commentators called it one of the most shocking moments in late-night television history. Analysts pointed out how Fallon's desperate attempts at humor had backfired, exposing not Reba's supposed sensitivity, but his own inability to handle confrontation. For Reba, the walkout wasn't a meltdown, it was a statement. It's a moment of control, a reminder that she wasn't just a guest on someone else's stage. She was a star in her own right. Backstage reports say Reba didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't falter. She simply collected her things, thanked the crew, and left with the same dignity she'd carried throughout her career. Meanwhile, Fallon struggled to regain his composure on air, fumbling through the next segment with a nervous laugh that convinced no one. By the following morning, headlines dominated every outlet. Reba walks out live. Fallon humiliated on air, country queen versus comedy king. What began as a tense exchange had erupted into a cultural flashpoint, a viral storm that blurred the line between entertainment and reckoning. The spotlight had shifted. Fallon had lost control of his show, and Reba. She had cemented her legacy as a woman who refused to be silenced. A storm in boots who walked out, not in defeat but in power. And for everyone watching, the message was clear. Sometimes the most powerful performance isn't a song. It's the moment you decide to walk away. What a moment. What a clash. And now, it's your turn to weigh in. Do you stand with Reba McEntire, the fearless country queen who refused to be silenced, who walked off Jimmy Fallon's stage with her dignity intact? Or are you siding with Jimmy Fallon, the host who insists it was all just comedy, harmless late-night banter, blown out of proportion? This wasn't just another TV segment. This was raw, unfiltered conflict, lived before millions, and the shockwaves are still being felt. Reba's walkout wasn't just a dramatic exit, it was a statement. Fallon's fumble wasn't just bad timing, it was a meltdown in plain sight. So, we want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Team Reba or Team Fallon? Who was right, who was wrong, and who crossed the line? And if you want more explosive stories like this, the clashes, the chaos, the unforgettable, walkouts that leave the world talking, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss the drama as it unfolds. Because here, the spotlight never dims and the stories never stop. So tell us, whose side are you on?